dive into this. Inches, minutes, and clicks. I usually combine my talking targets with inches, minutes, and clicks. A lot of shoot bosses don't. That's okay. Depends on what your time is looking like. I'm usually doing that to save time, to talk to the shooters when we go down range. You know, I usually find a good lineup of targets, how they're doing with this. We've actually usually shot 3 or 4 5-round groups at the squares by now. So there's a good idea of what the patterns are. So so we gather up at the target line. I say, shooters, let's look at the rifleman's best friend. The best friend is your target, because it will never lie to you. Okay. So what is our target telling us? That's what we want to find out. We want to find out 2 things: how big is my group, and where is my group? That's the questions that a rifleman asks when they come down to the target line. But let's take a moment to diagnose some more common issues that might be seen at the target line that are related to us as shooters at the firing line, of course. So when a shooter comes down and this is his target, and we see that there's 5 shots, but pretty well spread around that target, is there any reason for that shooter to adjust sights? Probably not, right? We call this a shotgun large group. What might cause a shotgun large group? And you ask the shooters, and they're going to say something, and one guy might say something else, and you can almost always say, yeah, probably, could be, because what do we have to do to solve a shotgun large group? We go back to the basics. We look at their steady hold factors in that position. We look at if they're doing the 6 steps of firing the shot. And then, of course, we're going to find of course, they're not having their natural point of aim, likely. But if all those things look good, maybe it's a mechanical issue. Maybe it's a loose set screw on that 1022. Maybe it's a sight that's about ready to fall off. We've seen them. Okay. So the shooter comes back and finds out, oh, it was the set screw. We got that tightened up, and we come back down and we find another 5-shot group about like this. Again, are we looking at adjusting sights yet? No. What might cause what we call a shotgun small group? We ask the question. And they might offer some answers, but typically a shotgun small grouping would be not focusing on that front sight or reticle. And typically we see a little bit bigger group with that, because this looks pretty centered around the target to me. It's just a little bit bigger than the target. So shotgun small likely is not focusing on the front sight. So let's look at another couple of typical shot patterns that we might see. We might see a shot pattern something like this. Again, pretty well centered on the target, wouldn't you say? But what do we call that? A horizontal stringing? What might cause a horizontal stringing, or what's more likely to be the cause of a horizontal stringing? Usually I'm going to tell them trigger control, squeezing the trigger straight back, or they're not squeezing the trigger straight back. They're dragging wood, you know, or they're hooking over the trigger when they're squeezing the trigger with that trigger finger. Does that make sense? And they're imparting just a little bit of lateral movement to that rifle as they squeeze. So, and then of course another shot pattern would be something like this: 5 shots, you know, a little bit vertical, right? Vertical stringing. We generally say that's a breathing issue. They're not pausing at the end of a regular respiratory cycle. Might be holding their breath halfway, or not even trying to hold their breath, or not even trying to pause of any kind. They're just taking a shot somewhere randomly in a breathing cycle. So, and of course, another typical grouping that we see, what do we call that? Diagonal string. And what typically would cause a diagonal string? Yeah, there's actually a combination of 2 things. The support elbow is probably not underneath the rifle, and probably a breathing issue as well. Okay, when you see a diagonal stringing like that. So, but the next time the shooter fixes everything and comes down, and we've got a nice 5-shot group right here, but this is the target. What's wrong with that group?
Sights in this case?
I say absolutely nothing. Nothing is wrong with that group. That's a great group. I would be very happy myself with a group like this. The only problem is it's not on the target, right?
Right.
How do we fix that?
Just the size.
Easy.
IMC.
Easy. We're getting into math. It's Saturday math, Sunday math, whatever it is. It's easy, okay? We need to understand that, if I ask the question, if this is your point of aim, and this center point right here, and let's say that this point right here is the center of your group, if we take those 2 points and make a line back to the shooter's eyeball, do we all agree that that creates an angle? It's an angle, right?
Yes.
What would we want that angle ultimately to be?
0.
0. 0. So we got to talk about angles, because that's an angle, and we want to eliminate that angle. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do a little bit of math. And of course, you ask the question, how do we measure angles typically?
Degrees.
In degrees. In degrees. So, okay, in a circle, how many degrees in a circle? 360. If a quarter of that is sectioned off, how many
90.
degrees? It's 90. Let's say, what if there's 1 degree of angle? What if we have 1 little tiny degree of angle? That's pretty small, right? But what does 1 degree of angle measure out at 100 yards? Does anybody know? Somebody's gonna know, usually.
4 or 5 inches?
Somebody's gonna say that?
60 inches.
Right. 60 inches is 1 degree of angle at 100 yards. Well, that's kind of a big angle, isn't it? That's too much.
1 click.
It's too much. Well, what if we divided that 1 degree of angle up into 60 equal parts? What if we call it 1 minute of angle? What would 1 minute of angle measure approximately at 100 yards?
1 inch.
1/60 of a 60.
1 inch. So 1 minute of angle is equal to 1 inch per 100 yards. Very important little formula that we need to know as riflemen, okay? So, and that's 1 inch per 100 yards. So if we have 1 inch at 100 yards, what does 1 degree of angle measure at 200 yards?
2 inches.
2 inches. It's linear, isn't it? It keeps on going, right? It's easy math, right? 3 inches at 300, etc. And 500. What does 1 minute of angle measure at 500 yards?
5.
About 5 inches. Okay, well, we got something here. Well, let's back it up. What if we cut that in half? What does that measure?
½ inch.
A 1/2 inch. What if we cut in half again? 1/4 inch. Well, that's interesting. We've been shooting at these targets here at 25 meters. 25 meters, 25 yards. We're going to interchange those terms. It's close enough for us as riflemen. Does anybody know how big this little guy is right here?
1/4 inch.
Well, I'll be. Somebody has our interests in mind when they made these targets for us, didn't they? They kind of made our math easy for us, didn't they? Because 1 minute of angle at 25 meters here is about 1/4 inch, which is one of these little squares. I need to measure how far off my group is from this target, don't I? But I don't have to measure because the measurement's already been made, right? All I have to do is count these little squares. And it looks like my group is high by about 1, 2, 3 squares, which is what?
3 MOA.
3
3/4 of an inch.
3 minutes of angle. Well, okay, we got this. And then how much to the left am I? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 minutes of angle. Now a rifleman's going to take this information and is going to write this down, because me as a rifleman, I have a 24 meter memory in a 25 meter world. So I want to write this down. I am 3 minutes what? High, and I'm 6 minutes to the left. Now, however you write it down is how you write it down as to what you are. This is my actual measurement. That's not the way I'm going to adjust my sights. Does that make sense? I'm actually writing down where my group is right now in relation to my target. So I'm going to take this information back to the target line, to the firing line with me, and I'm gonna do some math. I gotta do some math because, you know, well, maybe we don't need to do math. Let's talk about this. What if I'm firing my M1 Garand and I get this group here at this distance? Does anybody know how M1 Garand sight system works? Oddly enough, John Garand kind of had an idea that maybe one click on that rear sight up and down would move my impact 1 minute of angle. Crazy. Isn't that something? There's some smart people out there, smarter than me. So I know that if I'm 3 minutes high with my Garand, how many clicks down then do I adjust that rear sight? 3 clicks. Golly, that's easy math, right? And you know what? That same rear sight, drum sight, is adjustable for winded or for to laterally too. So if I need to bring it 6 minutes to the left, I mean to the right, excuse me. If I need to bring it 6 minutes to the right, how many clicks would that be?
6.
Pretty easy. Pretty easy math, right? Let's just say, okay, most of you aren't shooting an M1 Garand today, I get that. How about if you were shooting a scoped rifle? And if you took the little dust covers off that scoped rifle, what typically would that read under it? A lot of them say 1/4 inch at 100 yards. Now we got a little bit of math to do, because what is 1/4 inch at 100 yards?
4 MOS.
Well, yeah, you can get there. A lot of people can't get there yet though, right? It's, what I ask is, well, if it's 1/4 inch, that's how much it moves my impact at 100 yards. How many clicks would I need to move it a full inch, which I know is 1 minute of angle? Got to lead them down that path so that they understand that it's going to take 4 clicks of that sight system to equal 1 minute of angle.
4 times 6.
Isn't that easy?
4 clicks to
So
the
if I
right.
need to bring my sights down 3 minutes of angle, if I'm using one of those scoped rifles with this adjustment, how many clicks is that?
12.
Write that down. And if I need to bring it then to the right, this many minutes of angle, how many clicks is that?
24.
Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Everybody got that? And that's all we need to know for rifleman math today. But you know, when we talked earlier this morning, when we first did the introduction to our Appleseed, I mentioned that an Appleseed, our rifleman standards that we're aiming to shoot at is to be able to hit a 20-inch target out to 500 yards. Because that's what I teach at the Appleseed. That's what I intro with. Well, that seems kind of challenging, and it is. But let's go back and do some more math. We know that 1 minute of angle at 100 yards is 1 inch. What's 2 minutes of angle at 100 yards?
2 inches.
2 inches. What's 3 minutes of angle at 100 yards?
3 inches.
3 inches. What's 4 minutes of angle at 100 yards?
4 inches.
4 inches. So 4 minutes of angle at 100 yards is 4 inches. Well, okay, what do we do with that? Let's take it out to 200 yards. What's 4 minutes of angle at 200 yards?
8.
8 inches. 300 yards?
12.
400?
16.
It's easy math, folks, isn't it?
1/8.
20 inches. Let's back it up. What's 4 minutes of angle at 50 yards?
2 inches.
2.
How about at 25?
1.
1 inch.
How big is
Everybody know how big this little guy is?
1 inch.
Or how many minutes of angle is that at this
1.
distance?
4 MOS.
4 minutes of angle. Does everybody see the relation? This target here is in the same cone of fire as a 20-inch target up to 500 yards. Somebody's looking out for us when they made up these targets. We know now that if we can place 5 shots in this target at this distance, we have the ability to place those same 5 shots at a 20-inch target out to 500 yards, the rifleman's quarter mile. We can do it. I've seen it happen. I've done it myself, and it's something that can be done with practice. What are your questions on inches, minutes, and clicks?